I stared at the two pink lines for what felt like hours. My hands were shaking, my lips dry. Pregnant. The word echoed in my mind like a scream in an empty room. When I told David, he didn't flinch. He just sat there, silent. Then he stood up, grabbed his keys, and said, "I'm not ready for this." Just like that, he was gone. No fight. No apology. No plan. I couldn't breathe. I sat on the cold tiled floor of the bathroom, holding my stomach as if to shield my unborn baby from the silence he left behind. The silence that would now become our new normal. I wiped my tears and went to the only place I thought I'd find warmth, home. But the minute I walked into my parents' house with trembling lips and watery eyes, their faces hardened. "You did what?" my mother snapped. "You're pregnant." "Out of wedlock," my father added, his voice a mix of rage and disappointment. I tried to explain. I told them I was scared, that I needed help, that I'd figure it out if they just gave me a little time. But my words only made things worse. "You've shamed this family," my mother spat. "Don't come crying to us when life shows you pepper," my father added, standing and walking away like I was nothing but a stain on his name. My siblings didn't say a word. They just watched. Cold. Distant. Like I was already gone. And just before I walked out that door with my small overnight bag and my big, swollen heart, my mother hissed under her breath, "You come crawling back. Watch and see." I didn't know where I was going that day, I just knew I couldn't stay where I wasn't wanted. By evening, I found myself standing in front of a rundown building with flaking paint and a broken porch light that flickered like it too was holding on for dear life. A friend of a friend had offered me a room, just a mattress on the floor and a cracked window that didn't quite close, but it was all I could afford. I was 6 weeks pregnant, jobless, and emotionally shattered. The room smelled of dust and faint mildew. The walls were stained, the ceiling fan didn't work, and the single light bulb in the room gave off a weak, yellowish glow like it was ashamed to be there too. I sank onto the mattress, clutching my knees to my chest. There were no sheets, no pillows, just my small travel bag with a few clothes and an old photograph of me and David from better days, laughing, young, hopeful. I shouldn't have brought it, but I did. I stared at it for a long time before turning it face down on the floor. The silence in that room was deafening. No voices. No footsteps. No TV in the next room. Just silence and the sound of my own thoughts screaming louder than anything else. What have I done? How did I end up here? Will I ever come out of this? I thought about the dreams I once had, a warm home, a loving partner, a stable job, children raised in laughter and peace. And now, I was here, abandoned by the man I once loved, disowned by the family I once trusted. No degree. No income. No plan. I cried that night, not soft sobs, but the kind of crying that comes from the gut. The kind you can't hold in. The kind that empties you. I curled up on the mattress, clutching my stomach, apologizing to my unborn child over and over. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm so sorry you didn't get the start you deserved." But then, in the middle of my grief, I felt it. A flutter. A tiny kick. I froze, placing my hand gently over my belly. It happened again, a soft, unmistakable thump like a little foot saying, "I'm here. And I'm not giving up on you." Tears streamed down my face, but they were different this time. They weren't just from sadness. There was something else, something I hadn't felt in days. Hope. That small movement reminded me that even though I felt alone, I wasn't. I had someone who didn't care that I had failed or fallen or disappointed everyone else. Someone who already loved me from the inside out. That night, I made a quiet promise. I don't know how, and I don't know when, but we are going to be okay. I'll fight for us. I turned the photograph of me and David face down again, this time with no hesitation. Then I lay down, closed my eyes, and whispered into the darkness, "We'll rise from this. Somehow, we will." And though the mattress was thin, and the room was cold, for the first time since everything crumbled, I felt something strong stirring deep in my chest. Not anger. Not fear. But resolve. Labor started just after midnight. I was alone, of course. No hand to hold. No voice to coach me through the pain. Just me, gripping the edge of a rusted hospital bed with tears streaming down my face, biting down on my own sleeve so I wouldn't scream too loud. I didn't want to disturb the other women, most of whom had husbands pacing the halls or mothers whispering prayers by their sides. Me. I had no one. They called my name like I was just another number in the system. No fuss. No extra care. Just the next. But when I heard that first cry, raw, beautiful, and defiant, it felt like heaven opened for a second. The nurse placed my baby girl on my chest, and just like that, the loneliness melted for a moment. She was so tiny. So perfect. So unaware of how broken her mother was. I named her Eliana. God has answered. Because in that moment, I believed He had. But life didn't slow down. Not even for a day. 3 days later, I was back in that dingy room. This time, I wasn't alone. Eliana was beside me in a second-hand bassinet I'd picked up for free off a community notice board. I was recovering from stitches, my breast swollen and sore, my back aching from long nights of no sleep. But bills had no sympathy for postpartum pain. I started working part-time as a cleaner. Offices. Schools. Sometimes private homes. I'd carry Eliana on my back in a wrapper, scrubbing floors and wiping desks with one hand while keeping her close with the other. The pay was shameful, but it was something. Most nights, I'd feed her, rock her to sleep, and then sit at the edge of the bed just staring. Wondering if I was slowly losing my mind. There were nights I went to bed hungry. Nights I watered down powdered milk just to stretch it an extra day. I learned how to trick my body into ignoring hunger by sleeping early or just not sleeping at all. But one night almost broke me completely. Eliana had a fever. She was burning up in my arms, crying non-stop. I rushed to the nearby clinic, barefoot, holding her tight and begging God not to take her. I didn't have the consultation fee. They almost turned me away. I knelt on the floor, begging, crying, shaking. A nurse, God bless her, stepped in and whispered, "Bring her in. We'll talk later." I sat there in that waiting room, drenched in sweat and fear, watching my daughter's chest rise and fall. I remember whispering over and over, "Don't take her, Lord. If you take her, I won't survive it. I won't survive this." She pulled through. The fever broke that night. And as I held her, her breath calm and steady on my chest, something in me cracked wide open. I looked around at our life, at the broken ceiling, the cracked walls, the chaos, and whispered, "We won't live like this forever." I didn't know how. But I knew I couldn't let this be the end of our story. The next day, I walked into a local training center that offered free skill development for women. I signed up for sewing. I signed up for business skills. I didn't care what it was, I just knew I had to start. That was the moment I chose to fight. Not just survive. Fight. For Eliana. For myself. For every girl who had ever been told, "You can't make it alone." Her name was Madam Joyce. I met her on a Tuesday morning, just outside the community center. I had Eliana strapped to my back, my documents in a nylon file, and hope that was already starting to wear thin. I just found out the sewing class I wanted to join was full. Again. As I stood outside trying to decide whether to cry or just go home, she noticed me. A well-dressed woman in her 50s, calm and confident, with eyes that studied people deeply. She walked over and asked, "You okay, my dear?" I nodded. Lied, really. But she pressed gently, and before I knew it, I was telling her my story. Not all of it, but enough. Single mom. Struggling. Trying. Not giving up. She didn't pity me. She didn't gasp or overreact. She simply said, "Come to my house tomorrow." I hesitated. I teach baking. And business. For free. It's not a formal program. But I help women like you. I see the fire in your eyes. Don't let it die. I remember walking home with tears in my eyes and Eleanor giggling on my back. It felt like light was creeping into a room that had been dark for too long. The next morning, I showed up at her house. She welcomed me with a warm cup of tea and a notepad. Over the weeks that followed, I learned how to bake everything from meat pies to celebration cakes. I watched her balance orders, marketing, delivery. I learned more than recipes, I learned resilience. And she taught me how to price my work. How to talk to customers. How to believe in what my hands could create. Eliana would sit in a corner with her toys while I measured flour, mixed butter, wiped sweat from my brow. She'd clap every time a cake rose properly in the oven like it was magic. My first order was for a small birthday cake. A neighbor saw me practicing and said, "Can you make one for my son? I can only pay a little." I didn't care. I baked that cake like it was going to royalty. Wrapped it with care. And delivered it. When the customer smiled and handed me a crumpled Naira note, I went home feeling like I just won a medal. I stared at that money for minutes. Not because it was a lot, but because I earned it. With my hands. My skill. My grind. That night, Eliana crawled into my arms after dinner. Her cheeks were full from the meat pie we shared, her little fingers holding onto my wrapper. She looked up at me with those wide, trusting eyes and whispered, "Mommy, you're a superhero." I laughed, then cried. Because I was starting to believe her. That small, gentle door that Madam Joyce opened. It was the beginning of a new chapter. A chapter where I was no longer the girl begging to survive. I was now the woman building something, one loaf, one pie, one late night at a time. It didn't happen overnight. There were still hard days, late deliveries, spoiled ingredients, nights when Eliana had a fever and I had to bake with her tied to my back. But step by step, crumb by crumb, I was building something steady. Something mine. Word of mouth spread fast in our neighborhood. One order became 5. 5 became 10. People would stop me on the road and ask, "Are you the lady that made that coconut cake for Mr. Hassan's daughter?" "Yes," I'd reply, smiling. I saved every Naira I could. Said no to unnecessary spending. Said yes to growth. Within a year, I moved out of the one-room face me I face you apartment and into a self-contained flat. It wasn't flashy. But it had space. A kitchen that felt like my own workshop. A balcony where I could sip tea at night and dream bigger. Eliana now had her own bed. Her own reading corner. Her own little uniforms for school, always neat, always proud. At her first open day, her teacher told me, "You're raising a brilliant child." Confident. Kind. She always says her mommy is her best friend. I blinked fast to stop the tears. And then came something I never expected. Strangers began to find me online. It started when I posted a picture of a cake I made for a single mom's birthday. Captioned it with a short message. "To every woman rebuilding from scratch, I see you. You are stronger than you think." The post went viral. People began to message me, some asking for cakes, others just needing hope. Women sent long DMs saying things like, "You give me strength." I thought I was alone. So, I started posting more. Behind the scenes clips. Honest stories of my journey. The failures. The mistakes. The tiny wins that meant the world. I never sugarcoated the pain, but I also never let it define me anymore. And the more I posted, the more I healed. The more I shared, the more I soared. Someone once commented, "You don't look like what you've been through." And they were right. My skin glowed not just from skincare but from peace. My laughter rang louder now, not because life was perfect, but because I had survived the storm and was dancing in the rain. The same people who once said, "You'll come crawling back," now sent messages like, "We are proud of you." But I never replied. Because this glow wasn't for them. It was for me. For Eliana. For every woman rebuilding her life with nothing but grit and God. It was a quiet Saturday morning when I got the message. A WhatsApp text from a number I hadn't saved. The display picture showed a familiar compound wall, the one I'd stared at through tears years ago as I left with nothing but a plastic bag and a swollen belly. "Hi. We saw your bakery featured online. Congratulations. Mommy says she wants to talk." I froze. Not because I didn't expect it deep down, I knew the day would come. But I never imagined how complex it would feel. Success is strange like that. You spend years climbing out of a pit, bleeding and crawling, and just when you start dancing in the light, the same hands that pushed you down suddenly want to clap for you. My mother. The same woman who once said, "You have brought shame to this family," now wanted to visit me. The next week, she showed up. I stood in my doorway, apron dusted with flour, Eliana playing behind me, and watched as she stepped out of the car with my two sisters. Dressed in lace and heels like nothing ever happened. Smiling like she hadn't once said I'd regret my life. "Mama," I said, softly. She looked older. Slower. But still had that commanding air. She hugged me. Awkwardly. Loosely. Not the kind of hug that says, "I missed you," but the kind that says, "You've become useful now." Inside, she praised the decor. Commented on my daughter's manners. Complimented the meat pie. But she never said the words I truly needed. "I'm sorry." At one point, while sipping juice, she looked at me and said, "You know, I was just trying to protect you. It's hard for a single mother out there." I smiled. But not because I agreed. I smiled because I had already made peace with the fact that closure doesn't always come in apologies. Sometimes, it comes in the form of your own peace. Your own boundaries. So I nodded, served her cake, and listened to her stories. But I didn't invite her to stay over. I didn't offer to send money. And I didn't beg for her love. When she and my sister stood to leave, she gave me a long look and said, "You did well, my daughter. Maybe even better than if you had married that useless boy." I laughed lightly. "Maybe," I replied. But I didn't do it to prove anything. I did it because I had to survive. And that was the truth. I didn't chase success to win back my family. I built my life because my daughter deserved better, and so did I. And as I watched them drive off, I didn't feel bitterness. Just a quiet strength. They had returned. But I wasn't the same girl they once rejected. I was a woman now whole, healed, and deeply rooted in purpose. The auditorium was full. Rows of women, young and old, filled the seats, their eyes fixed on the stage. Some held notepads. Others clutched tissues. All of them had come for one thing: hope. And today, I was the one holding the microphone. It still felt surreal. 10 years ago, I stood in a hospital hallway holding a newborn with trembling hands and an empty purse. Now, I stood before hundreds, wearing a fitted blazer with my bakery's logo pinned proudly on my chest, not just a baker anymore, but a speaker, a mentor, a survivor with a story. Behind me on the projector screen was a picture of Eliana in her school uniform, her latest report card stamped with a scholarship badge. "She wants to be a lawyer," I said, smiling at the crowd. "A defender of the voiceless." I wonder where she got that from. Laughter. Applause. But I wasn't here for applause. I was here for that one woman sitting at the back, who might be wondering how she'd feed her baby tomorrow. For the teenage girl who just discovered she was pregnant and was terrified to tell her parents. For every woman who had ever been told she was finished. I paused, my voice low now personal. I didn't have a village. I didn't have a trust fund. All I had was desperation. And then, faith. Then, grit. Then, a reason her. Eliana. I pulled out a framed photo. Eliana and I at her school's Excellence Award ceremony. She had her arms around me, that signature toothy grin that made every dark year worth it. The room went silent. Not the awkward kind, the sacred kind. I was told I wouldn't make it, I said. And maybe they were right. A bit. Because I didn't just make it. I outgrew it. The place erupted. Claps. Tears. Hugs. But I wasn't crying anymore. Because I had finally stepped into the version of myself I used to dream of from a stained mattress in a single room with cracked walls. Later that night, I sat on my tiny balcony, barefoot, legs tucked under me, a cup of zobo in hand. Eliana curled up beside me, fast asleep, her head on my lap. The stars were out. The city buzzed below. And as the wind brushed my skin, I whispered softly into the night. To every woman they counted out. Keep going. One day, your glow up will be louder than their doubt.